Welcome to the Resume Storyteller, bringing you interviews with industry experts, regular folks who tested the job search waters and succeeded, and strategies to tell your story and land you job interviews. Here's your host, Virginia Franco.
I am so excited to have with me today Chris Delaney. He is an interview coach, a hypnotist, and a published author. As a dyslexic with a terrible lisp when in high school, Chris speaks from experience when it comes to overcoming personal barriers. Today is the founder of Employment King, a certified NLP Life Coach, a hypnotherapist, and a career advisor. He brings to the table 15 plus years of experience supporting people to achieve their life and career goals. Chris believes that passion and luck create success. And in his new book, What is Your Interview Identity? Chris has developed an interview prediction grid model to help career professionals succeed in job interviews. Chris, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much. I didn't realize how much I've achieved in my 40 years on this earth. That was a great intro.
It's all you. I didn't make any of that up. So
it's really funny though, isn't it? Hearing like your past successes and someone explaining what you've done. It's great. I feel really good now.
Very good. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm in the US. You're in the UK. I'd love for you to give us a quick overview of what you do day in and day out and how you came to be in this position and write this book.
So I basically help anxious career professionals pass the job interview. Because we've all been there, haven't we? Where, we're very successful in our career, we're getting promotion after promotion, but we're trying to get to that next level. And when people have a big challenge in front of them, they start feeling more anxious, more fearful, and more scared. So what I do in those situations is help people control their emotions, become more confident, overcome their interview fears and phobias, and to be successful in that recruitment process.
Excellent. And so how did you come to find this as your purpose and your passion?
As you mentioned in the intro, when I left school, I left with no qualifications. I see myself as a dyslexic loser. That was my mindset leaving school. Wow. I struggled to read, I struggled to write. I had a terrible lisp as well, so I couldn't talk. Which is really funny now because as a coach, you talk for a living, and as an author, you have to read and write. So I feel I have travelled a long way. But I left school with no qualifications, and I started working on like low skilled positions. My first job, by the way, was £1 an hour. So that's like $1.50 per hour.
Yeah, that's crazy, next to nothing, right?
Next to nothing before minimum wage came in. Yeah. So I was working these low skill jobs, but I knew I had a passion for helping people. That's what I always had inside me. I was the sort of child where the friends would come and tell them all the problems, and I would just sit there and listen. Probably because I had the list, but I didn't want to talk to embarrass myself. I just sat there and didn't say anything. So they loved talking to me. But I also knew I wanted to do something in the professional setting as well. But I had these limiting beliefs where I was dyslexic, had no qualifications, so there's no way I can get paid for helping people. So I started to volunteer. I used to volunteer taking disabled adults rock climbing and hiking, and work with like youth groups and scout groups, just so I could spend my time assisting people. Anyway, back in the workplace, I'm still working in these low skilled jobs, but I'm on, $3 an hour now. I'm doing quite well.
Right.
But it also, it's a very low wage. And I get this lucky opportunity. I get a chance to learn how to drive a forklift truck. And on the course, I'm fantastic because I'm a kinesthetic learner. So physically being on the truck and driving is something that helps me learn.
Yeah, hands-on learning. I know that with a lot of dyslexics, that's really instrumental.
Yeah, definitely. It's just that kind of way our brain is wired. So I'm driving around the chicanes, lifting up the pallets, putting them down. I'm like the king of the truck. But my colleagues, because it's quite a nervous experience learning how to drive these big trucks, were really fearful and they was crashing into the chicane. They nearly drove over the instructor a couple of times. They wasn't doing too well. And the instructor actually said to me, he said, "Chris, you're going to pass the forklift truck license." And then he turned around to my colleagues and said, "But you're going to fail," which made him even more fearful and more scared. So I went over to him and I taught him this visualization technique that I used to teach the disabled adults when they was afraid to do a little bit of rock climbing. And it's a technique I use now as a hypnotherapist actually, but I didn't realize how powerful it was at the time. So anyway, they get onto the truck and they're brilliant. They get really confident. They drive on the chicane, they lift up the pallet, put it down, and they pass the test. Fantastic. Anyway, 12 months later, the person who taught me to drive the forklift truck comes back to see me in my workplace and says, Chris, do you remember who I am? I was like, yeah, you're the guy who taught me to drive the forklift truck. He goes, no, I'm the managing director of the organization. The only reason I was there that day, I know, I couldn't believe it either. He said the only reason I was there that day is because the instructor was ill. So I just came down and delivered the training session. But I always remember when you had that nervous colleague and you gave the magic whisper. This is what we call it, that you was the magic whisperer, and you said something to her and they became really confident and could drive the truck. We talk about you in each of our monthly team meetings. Anyway, I've come down here today because we see something special in you. We want to offer you the opportunity to become a forklift truck instructor. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then he goes, it costs £3,000. So I was like, this is a con. Like, I pay £3,000. There's not a job at the end of it. You know, I'm out of pocket, but I'm on like $3 an hour. So I don't have £3,000. I barely have $30 in my bank account. And, you know, I'm really poor. I'm eating beans and toast for tea. That's how poor I am. And he could see that in my face and said, no. We're going to pay for that course for you. We're going to mentor you. We're going to train you. We're going to support you. And you're going to get a massive salary increase as well. So for me, I was passionate about helping people. I didn't think I could do it in the professional setting. So I volunteered, learned loads of skills volunteering. I started reading some books around helping people as well at that time. But then I seen this opportunity and I just took it. And I think that's what we need to do. When you get opportunities, take them. We're so scared of the unknown. We're so scared of taking a risk, but sometimes you just have to go for it to create success.
No, I agree. So it's sort of pivoting to the part of your expertise that I think that your book speaks about and that will resonate with the people listening to this podcast. I want to jump in and talk about interviewing, because, you know, I know you speak a lot on that. Can you sort of share with us, how has interviewing changed in the past 10 years or so? I feel like there's been some big evolutions thanks to technology.
There's been massive evolution. So the first thing, from the employer's point of view, most employers now use a structured job interview because the research and evidence shows that a structured job interview can help the employers better predict the job performance of each applicant. So employers are using this structured based interview process. But what they're finding now is, because of technology, loads of people are applying for jobs and they need to be able to shift down the unsuitable applicants. So back 10 years ago, you used to apply for a job. About 20, 30 other people used to do a handwritten application, apply for the same position, and then 5 or 6 people got interviewed. These days, with recruiters, with online CVs, with LinkedIn, and, you know, people being able to mass upload applications, about 2,000 people are applying for advertised jobs. Some organizations are getting 20,000 people, like Google and stuff. Microsoft get 20,000 people. It's absolutely crazy. The stats say the average is 250. So what's happening now with the interview process is they're using AI to do interviews. And this is the future of recruitment processes. So you'll go into a website at an allotted time and then a random question will come up. And there'll be 3 questions on average, and you'll read the question and then you'll have to deliver your answer to camera for 1 to 2 minutes. And then the robots will then scan using an audio package or scan your answers or pick out the turns. They can even pick up on tonality shifts and stuff like that now, but they'll pick up all these criteria and reference that against the job criteria to see if you're suitable. And then if you are suitable, humans at the end of the recruitment process will be the people interviewing you. So that sounds quite crazy, but it's been happening for years already. We get robots scanning CVs and resumes and application forms all the time. Robots will write and create job adverts as well. So this is kind of like the next evolution. But then you hear like Facebook talking about the metaverse, don't you, quite a lot? So the future job interviews could be, VR job interviews where you do it from your home, but you're in the metaverse, in an office with the employer, having some sort of online virtual job interview. But we're not too sure where that's going to go yet.
But you're right, the AI piece. I know here in the States, financial services companies have been using that a lot for their new grads. My son just graduated from college, and all of his interviews with the big banks were all that one-way AI interviewing. The good thing was that he knew the questions ahead of time, so it gave you preparation, but it was unnerving to show emotion and stare into a screen without anyone on the other end giving you feedback.
Yeah, it's really hard, and it definitely increases the anxiety. It's that interesting that he got given the questions before the interview, because a lot of employers are starting to avoid that. Again, the research shows...
he did. They were mostly with HireVue, and so he did have a lot of the questions ahead of time.
Okay, yeah, so that helps him create like high strength, high scoring interview answers. A couple of tips though, if you're doing it to camera, if it's a real person, you can kind of frame the camera so it's like a chest to the top of the head, and that allows people to see your facial expressions, your gestures, as well as like hearing your answers. You can also look directly into the camera lens rather than looking onto the screen, which is what we naturally do, and that increases online eye contact. And then if it's a virtual interview, you're kind of like worried about these robots interviewing you. You don't actually see a robot on the other end. You just see yourself on camera. But a good thing to do is put a picture of someone above the screen. So someone you don't know who you're pretending is the interviewer, and pretend to talk to that picture of that someone. And that makes it feel a little bit more real, which helps you to become a bit more natural in the job interview.
No, I think that's a great idea. Now you often speak about unconscious interview bias and how employers' behaviors affect the applicant job seeker. I'd be curious to get your thoughts on how that plays out in general, but also if that's a factor with the AI interviews.
So unconscious bias is a massive factor with AI bots, because AI bots make decisions based on human data, and humans have lots of unconscious bias. So they've done this before prior to using bots in job interviews, where they try to get robots to analyze information from people in court cases to see if they're likely to have committed a crime or not. And what they found is that the robots were more likely to give a black person a longer sentence than a white person, because it's all based on human data, and humans in the past have been racist. So it's all about the data that's fed to the robots that changes the outcome to it. But in the job interview, unconscious bias plays a massive part. As soon as the employer comes downstairs to meet the applicant in reception, they, in that instantaneous moment, it's not 5 seconds or 10 seconds, it's like milliseconds, they make an opinion about that person based on numbers of factors. So their gender, their ethnicity, their size, their perceived age, their tonality, their handshake, what that person's wearing, even the posture and body language of the applicant in front of them. All these bits of data goes into the head, into a filter, and they go, I like that person, or I don't like that person. That's kind of like the first initial filter on unconscious bias. It also starts like prior to the job interview. You get the halo and horns effect. So the halo effect is when, I don't know, an internal manager says to another manager who's recruiting for internal candidates for a promotional position, to go, oh, Chris is applying for that job, isn't he? I don't know why he's applying for it. It's not, it doesn't seem suitable for me for that role. That then creates the horns effects, a negative opinion of that person before they actually meet him. Or an employer going onto your social media feed and seeing it filled with like sector-related information, industry knowledge, comments, and all this like positive stuff could potentially create the halo effect, where they go, God, this person seems ideal for the role, and then they got a positive filter before actually meeting a person on the recruitment day. So the first unconscious bias is like the first filter.
What? You said halo and something else?
Halo and horns. So halo is a good opinion about someone, and the horns, the devil's horns, is a negative opinion about someone.
And that happens before the person has even met you face to face, screen to screen. And then when that face to face, screen to screen happens, the judgments and opinions are literally instantaneous.
Yeah, so it's like instantaneous. They did an experiment in America actually, where they sent off hundreds of applications to hundreds of different employers, but it's attached to it a picture of either an obese person or an average weight person, whatever an average weight person is. So the same application went off with one of these two photographs, and the conclusion was that the obese person was seen as lazy by the employers and was less likely to get an interview offer based off the photograph, because the application form was the same as the average weight person.
And so everyone walks in with their own baggage, right? And so what kind of jobs, is there anything a job seeker can do? Obviously they can help with the halo effect by trying to get people to share positive opinions of them beforehand, have make sure their social media profiles look great, but you can't change lots of those other things about you.
Yeah. It's really interesting as well because you have this unconscious bias and then that changes the interviewer's behavior, which then subtly and subconsciously changes how the applicant behaves in the interview as well. So it's like, I don't think you're going to be very good for this role. So I change my behavior at the subconscious level. You start acting, different to what you would do if I was being positive and supportive. So now I go, oh, it's the self-fulfilling prophecy. I knew you was going to be rubbish. And now you're acting rubbish. But you can definitely break this down. If you got, a sexist, racist or ageist interview, it's very hard to win those people over because they just don't like a certain group for a certain reason. But the interview is a logical, analytical process. The employer really just wants to hire the best person who's going to fit into the team, the culture, and the person who can get the best performance out of that role. So they really want someone to be successful. They're not trying to trip people up. The applicant then needs to think about their interview identity. So your interview identity is your perceived level of knowledge and experience and your level of confidence in that interview. And to get a strong interview identity, you need to be communicating your competencies confidently. So the employer thinks, I'm not too sure if you're suitable because of unconscious bias. They ask you the first opening question, tell me about your experience. If you talk about your experience in such a way where the employer's like, wow, God, I didn't realize you got this unique selling point. You've been in the industry for 10 years. You got this great qualification and you're talking about these skills, qualities and experience in such a way that you're inspiring me. That then becomes the new filter because our mind's lazy. We make snap decisions, but those snap decisions can be influenced by how that person acts in a given moment.
Okay. So in order to build a strong interview profile, you have to be able to communicate your competencies strongly. Is there any other, what other advice do you have to sort of strengthen your profile going in to try to get those people that are looking for the best candidates? You're not dealing with someone who's ageist, sexist, that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. So things that make high scoring interview answers. So, and again, that interview identity, by the way, you need to do that early on in the interview because it just becomes the filter. We get dead lazy. So if I don't think you're good, I'm not going to encourage you. I'm not going to write down all the answers. I think you're good. I'm going to ask you additional questions. I'm going to have strong eye contact. I'm going to be nodding as you're talking to really encourage you. So that happens at the beginning. Infinity bias as well is a great way to get employers on your side. So what you can do is check the employers on LinkedIn, on social media, find anything that you have in common with that person. So you went to the same school, got a similar sounding surname, you've got the same interests and hobbies. If you randomly mention that as you're walking upstairs to the interview room and bring it into a natural conversation, that person will then like you more because you've got something in common with them. This is where the whole old school tie comes in. Oh, I see you went to that university, so did I. And then you have an infinity bias. So that's a great way.
Try to find some common ground.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very little simple thing, but it's very powerful as well. Okay. Also, talking about sector-related theories and models gets the perception of you being a more suitable and skilled applicant. So do you know that dead common ask the interview question like, tell me how you manage your time? And everyone goes, well, I put things in my calendar, I have a to-do list that I tick off, blah, 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 blah. And it's kind of like a basic, simple answer. But if you talk about like the time management matrix theory and describe what that is, it makes you sound more professional, more of an authority on that subject because you're referencing academic models and theories. And it's a great way to be seen as a powerful person by knowing a couple of different theories and models related to your sector and embedding them into your interview answers.
Interesting. Okay. So speak to the process that you create to do X, Y, and Z, or the theories behind it.
Yeah, definitely. Because then that's like a logical answer. And you can mix that up as well. You can sort of explain the logic of the theory or the model. And then you can give a real life example. So you're kind of saying the same thing twice. Here's the theory and model. Now here's me doing that in a previous job role. So you're saying the same thing twice, ticking the criteria twice, but you're seeing more of an authority because one, your answer is a lot longer. And the research shows that the more words per answer often relates in more job offers. You often vary your language when you're talking about models and real life experience. And when you often talk about real life experiences, your tonality and volume in your voice often change. And again, the research say that the longer answers, the more varied language, the emotive words and change in volume and tonality really engages the employer to get them to listen to you more intently, which allows them to score you higher on the interview scorecard.
Okay. How do you advise job seekers to prepare for different parts of the interview process? So, for instance, the phone screen is sort of the first screen that someone will do, the HR person will do before passing you on to the next round. Is there advice that you recommend for that might be different than advice you might share with someone preparing for that next level, that in-person or Zoom interview?
Yeah, so the telephone interview is... My research is always showing that they're doing less telephone interviews now, aren't they? More, like you said, like Zoom interviews as well. But the telephone interview is still a common one. What really trips people up is to get anxious before a job interview. Then when you're anxious, your short-term memory just disappears because you end up going into fight and flight mode. So your short-term memory just like disappears. So you can't answer questions as detailed as you would if you was feeling calm and confident. But the great thing about a telephone interview is you can have things in front of you to use as prompts. Now, you never want to write down a full interview answer because people can tell that you're just reading from a script and it doesn't sounds a little bit robotic and you don't get that rapport going with the employer. But if you have like a couple of prompts, like opening, a couple of actions that you've done and then like the outcome for a particular situation, you can use that in front of you. It's so easy to predict the job interview questions from most job roles that you can prepare your answers. In fact, we talk about the 3 rules of a successful job interview. The first one is identifying the job criteria so you know what to talk about. The second one is being a self-promoter, especially in England. I don't know about America, but in England, we're so reserved. We hate saying how great we are, where you need to in a job interview. It's kind of expected, isn't it? And then the third rule for a successful job interview is communicate with confidence.
The second one is to be okay speaking about yourself. Is that correct? Or did I miss that?
Yeah, well, being a self-promoter. So one of the problems people do is, and again, it's often due to a bit of anxiety, is to get asked an interview question and they'll just talk about like the normal business as usual activities that everyone, in that industry does. Where what you want to be doing is talking about those situations and events where you stood out, where you made a difference, where your actions, your advice, your experience was the stuff that driven that project or that goal forward. So you want to be talking about the specific actions that you took that made a difference in the organization.
Okay. So being able to communicate how your actions impacted.
Yeah, and constantly as well being positive. So when they look at the research between high confident and low confident job applicants, what they found is time and time again, if you got a low level of self-esteem in a job interview, you'll self-disclose weaknesses without the employer prompting you. So as an example, I've had this when I do interview coaching. I'll say to someone, tell me about a success, like common like success job interview question. And they'll go, well, I didn't do that well on that other project. And they kind of talking to themselves, but out loud, self-disclosing weaknesses. And it's like, no. High confident people don't do that. They just talk about how great and how wonderful and how good they are.
That makes perfect sense. So for people that, when you are not on the phone in the phone interview, you can't have prompts in front of you. What advice do you have to sort of keep that confidence up when you are in person or online?
What you need to remember every single time you go to a job interview is most interviewers are just as nervous as you are. In actual fact, if you're not being interviewed by a HR recruiting team and you're just being interviewed by your potential line manager, it's unlikely that person's been through intensive interview training. So they're often dead nervous. They're a little bit anxious themselves. And I think just knowing that allows you to feel a little bit more confident.
Most people are not experts in interviewing.
And they sit there. You can see it. So like once you start recognizing the traits, you can see it. They're looking down all the time. They're pulling invisible cotton out the shirts and rubbing themselves, itching their arms and the legs. It's just a sign of nervousness. So a great thing to do is create a conversation. So what often happens is the employee asks a question and then the applicant will just answer it straight away. But you don't want to do that. You want to ask follow-up interview questions. So as an example, if the employee says, we'll use the success one again. If the employee says, tell me the time that you've been successful, the applicant can say, would you like me to tell you about a successful time in work or a successful time out of work? And what that does is, one, the employee's got to answer that question. And they normally go, it doesn't really matter. Maybe work. No, it's up to you. So they kind of like, because they're not expecting a comeback question. But then that allows you, the applicant, to sit there and think for 2 or 3 seconds, right, what's a really good answer? I've been preparing for this interview, or which example should I use for this situation? It just gives you a little bit of time and creates a bit of a conversation.
Excellent. No, I think that's such good advice. And you can prepare a lot of your follow-up questions sort of ahead of time and try to weave them in, right? Based on the questions that you're getting asked.
Yeah, definitely. People always say, what questions should I ask at the end of the interview? Ask questions like throughout the interview. If they're talking about the company culture, ask questions about that, because the interview is a two-way process. I know it's like an old thing that all interview coaches say. It's a two-way process, but it really is. You should be looking at that organization and thinking, is this organization right for me? What's the culture of the company? What's the management and leadership styles? What's their vision and objectives? What are the values? Because there's so many jobs out there these days. We can work on a global basis now, can't we? You don't have to just work in your own country. And companies as well know that we job hop every 3 to 5 years. So they're always recruiting, and employers really want someone good who's going to stay at their organization. That power balance now is back on you. Apart from the companies where, I think it's in Czech Republic, you tend to have one job for 20, 30, 40 years like we used to many years ago in the UK. But in America, in England, in a lot of Europe, we job hop every 3 to 5 years. So employers are desperate to get someone good and keep them. So the power's on your side.
And do you feel like that very first phone screen is an acceptable time to start asking questions to judge if the role is right for you? Or do you feel like that should, get past the first screen and then start diving in?
So with the first screen, they often ask you 2 or 3 questions just to see if you kind of got the skills and experience for that job role, and then decide. And often it's different people who interview you throughout those 3 or 4 recruitment processes. Amazon do this for their leaders at positions. They have often 6 interview rounds, and it's different people at each individual round, where smaller organizations might have just, the HR team doing a couple of interviews. But I would recommend always asking questions, because a question creates a conversation, and a conversation creates rapport with you and that interviewer. And then when you go to the second round, if it's a different person, you can ask them similar questions that you asked the first person, because, it's not kind of recorded in detail on the screen.
Okay. All right.
And it's really about likability, this part. This is where the whole confidence part of the interview identity is all about rapport, about likability. If I like someone a little bit more, I might score them just a little bit higher, or encourage them to talk a little bit more so they get scored a little bit higher. And you'll often find, when you get a job, that you got one more point than the person next to you. So you'll get a job and they'll say, oh God, it's a really strong round of applications. We was very unsure about the last couple of person, but you just made it. And what they're kind of saying there is you got one more point than the person behind you.
That's right. It gives you that competitive edge, right?
Yeah, it's a competitive edge. So sometimes just smiling a little bit more, a longer answer, stating a model, or using the infinity bias technique. Sometimes this little thing just gets you that one extra point, which is enough to get that new job with a $10,000 pay rise.
I love that. Want to sort of shift gears and ask you about what people should be wearing. We keep reading that gone are the days where everyone needs to wear a coat, a jacket and a tie, or the female equivalent. What are your thoughts on that, especially now that we have moved to Zoom interviews? What do you recommend how should people dress?
They should definitely wear trousers. People always say this thing about you can just wear a shirt and a tie, but no trousers. But there's been so many times when people are stood up, still on camera, and they're just wearing shorts or whatever. The whole outfit thing as well, that you don't need to wear a shirt and tie and stuff. A lot of bloggers talk about this. So you'll see the best 10 things to dress, or you can peacock and you can do this, that, and the other. But what it all comes down to is this unconscious bias again. So when the person meets you for the first time, they make an opinion of you based on everything, including your outfit. So if you generalize that you have to wear a suit and a shirt or a smart dress or whatever, you're kind of in a safe bet there because people perceive that as a professional outfit. So you get like a positive unconscious bias. There's a TV program in the UK called Dragon's Den. In America, it's called the Shark Tank. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Dragon's Den, I think it started in the UK. There's this, billionaire entrepreneur called, Peter, and he always talks about, what people wear. And he says, I can't believe people come to pitch to me wearing t-shirts and jeans. As soon as they walk in, I have a negative opinion about them, straight away because they've not made an effort for their pitching, interview. And he only ever, gives money to the people who don't wear suits if they got, a high level of knowledge about their expertise or their product that they're selling. And it's the same with a job interview. You kind of have to look smart to create that first impression, unless the employer is an employer that doesn't really care too much about that outfit. One of the things that Peter Jones works with is Naked Smoothies, I think it's called, in Britain. I think they're in the US as well. And their culture and their company is all about wearing t-shirts, being creative, being innovative, a very laid-back attitude.
Right.
So that interviewer
research to understand the corporate culture.
Yeah, that's it. So research goes a long way. But still, if that was me going for the interview, I'd still be tempted to at least be smart casual, because it does create that first impression. We see you and we instantly have an opinion made about you.
So it's sort of like one step above how they dress.
Yeah, I would. And the other thing as well, if you're kind of thinking, well, I want to do the casual thing because it's, I've researched the company, it's very casual. Even in the letter they said you don't need to wear a suit or a shirt, you can come in a t-shirt or whatever. It's to kind of state that out. You also want to wear like a smart you want kind of to be smart or well fitted. But what's really important that people don't really talk about though is your posture, your body language. Now that creates the impression. If you're stood with your head held, your shoulders back, your kind of chest out a little bit, like confident and charismatic people do. If you've got your chin held up a little bit high and your eye contact's really strong, you're going to create a charismatic impression on that person, because we find confident people attractive. And when we find someone attractive, we see them as a better employee.
Interesting. So chin up, eye contact, shoulders back.
Yeah, and well-fitted clothes often. There's loads of research into a theory called what is beautiful is good. And this is all around if you find someone attractive. And like I said, confidence equals attraction for most people. If you find someone attractive, you're going to think they're more intelligent. You're going to think they're more charming. You're going to think they're going to be more suitable for the team that you're involved in, just through attractiveness. And attractiveness is in the eye of the beholder as well, isn't it?
Right. So it's all of just these little things contribute to improving someone's unconscious bias of you.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said before, once that likability factor from the unconscious bias happens, which is just at the subconscious level, I will then at a subconscious level encourage or discourage you to give strong or weak interview answers.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow. So I'd like to ask you about a question that I get all the time because it's tricky, about money, and when to answer the salary question, when not to. What is your take on when is the appropriate time to start talking money from a job seeker's perspective, and how do you advise job seekers to answer that question?
So there's three types of jobs when you think about salary. One, like the set salary. So if you work for somewhere like, I don't know, McDonald's or a call center or something like that, you're probably going to be on a set hourly wage, and it's non-negotiable in that. The middle one is where you're on an increase in salary. So you're on a band, so you get X amount up to X amount, and you can negotiate where you're going to start on that salary band or in between it. And then each year you get a pay rise until you reach the top of that salary band. Right. And then the third one, which is for high pay positions, is where you can negotiate your salary during that interview process. Generally speaking, for the high pay positions, you're going to have at least 3 job interviews. And normally it's in the last couple of job interviews where you start discussing salaries and terms and that sort of stuff. What you always want to do when you're negotiating a salary is be the person to first set the salary expectation, because that works as a baseline. So as an example, let's say the salary expectations for a certain job role is between 50 and 70,000 pounds. If the employer goes in and says, right, we're going to offer you 55, you as the applicant will then negotiate based on that baseline figure on that 55. So you might go, okay, 55, so I'll go 65, and you negotiate and you end up at 60. But if you set the salary baseline, so you say, okay, it's 70,000, the employer then uses your reference as a baseline. So they might go 70, okay, 60, and you negotiate and end on 65. So you're making like 10 grand more just by being a person who negotiates that first salary offer.
So you recommend the job seeker set the basis for that initial discussion?
Yeah, definitely. So you normally it's normally, with a lot of companies, it's normally quite clear when they're going to negotiate the salary. Or maybe it just comes up in the interview. So the interviewer say, you're doing really well. We're down to the last 2 people. We want to talk salaries. And you can say, great, I've been thinking a lot about this. What, with my knowledge, my experience, the added value I can bring to your company, and then mention a couple of things that you talked to about the interview. I can do this, that, and the other to help you achieve your goals or make loads of profit, blah, 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 blah. I know my salary, my worth is, and then you state that initial figure, because unless they got a very specific figure in mind, they'll negotiate based off your baseline figure.
Okay. So I'm hearing you say that you need to have whatever you offer out there needs to be grounded in an understanding of what you're worth, what the market bears. Like, you need to do your homework. You can't just throw out some crazy number.
Yeah, because if like the average is 50,000, you're like, I want 100,000. They're like, it's just no point. But if it's like, when you go into a shop and you want to buy some furniture, if that shop has got no prices on it, you've got no idea what that furniture costs. So you go to the salesperson, I'm really interested in this sofa, and they say, okay. And when you say, how much is it? That person can then name any figure. Because at that moment, you've got no idea what that sofa costs. If they name a really high figure, you will automatically go, there's loads of quality. That sofa must be a quality sofa because it's $2,000 as an example, or $3,000 compared to them saying it's $100. So the value creates worth in our mind. It's a very weird psychological process. It's a bit like, have you ever do you buy wine? Do you drink wine at all?
I do. Yes.
Yeah. So
imagine I got to go to Napa.
So imagine then, like, you got like a real special day coming up, a birthday, an anniversary, something like that, and there's 3 bottles of wine. So one's $7, one's $10, and one's $12. What normally happens is most people will go for the middle product, because the expensive one might be a little bit too expensive. The cheaper one is seen to be a cheap drink, but the middle one is, a good buy. But if there's a 4th bottle, so the 4th bottle is $14, so $2 more than the last most expensive one, most people will buy the 3rd most expensive bottle. So the way money's set, the way salaries are set, changes the way we think in our mind. And it's a very important lesson to learn. So always state your worth and then start the salary negotiations by stating the figure that you want, and make it a little bit higher than the average in the industry.
No, I totally agree with that. I want to ask you about, let me back up. You, earlier in our discussion, we talked about the power of asking questions in terms of promoting a conversation and increasing your likability. And I've often heard people say that they always recommend you have a couple of powerful questions on hand to close out an interview, sort of to leave a good impression in their mind. Is there a favorite question or two that you find is particularly effective or powerful, or does it really just depend on how the conversation is going?
I would definitely be asking questions to uncover what the culture of the company is like, to make sure you're happy to be there. So I might say, what makes you work at this organization? Can you tell me a little bit about the company culture? Out of the 5 values that you state, what's the most important for you as an organization? So I get a little bit of insight into the company, because that helps me decide if I want to work there or not. But to help them to see you as a more suitable applicant, you can say something along the line. So now I've told you about my skills and my experience and the sort of added value I can bring to the organization. If you offered me the job, what would you see me doing in the next 3 to 6 months? And what that makes them do is to positively think about you in their organization being successful. So it kind of embeds that you're working in an organization and being successful.
So the question is, how would you see me?
Yeah, so how would you, or like, what would you see me doing in the first 3 months, or how can you see me working within the team? But state it in terms of the skills and qualities that you discussed in the interview, and then future pace it. What would you have me doing? How would you see me working with the team? What projects do you think I'd be able to work on? That last one as well, like especially if you're working in a company that's got different departments and projects and they're recruiting quite a lot of people, saying what department or projects would best suit my skill set and my experiences, gets them to compare your skill set and experiences across the different departments.
I like that. So it's making them visualize you in the role.
Yeah, and the reason why it's so important, that visualization, is because what you see, you feel. So when you see someone, or imagine that person, working successfully in your team, you feel quite a positive thing about them, don't you? You're kind of drawn to that person compared to someone who your visualization as a negative. And this is why using confident, emotive language is dead powerful in job interviews, because the more emotive and confident you are in that job interview, the more they're warm to you. So the visualization you all the time, but in a positive way.
Interesting. So and I'm sure you have many, but let's say someone comes to you at a party and says, I'm going to go to an interview. I have so much anxiety. What one tip do you have for me to help calm my nerves? What would you say? You've already given a lot, but do you have one that's just your favorite?
Yeah, so my favorite technique is a visualization technique. So it's a real nice link, actually. It's like we planned it. So what often happens is what you see, you feel. So if you're fearful of job interviews, you often imagine yourself being fearful, anxious, worried, getting the questions wrong. You play this negative film out in your mind. So you feel terrible. And then that kind of loops back. So what you see, you feel, and what you feel, you start visualizing. If you get that thought, push it outside your head, and you can actually try it now, Virginia. Like, imagine something you're really scared of. Push it outside your mind so you can see the edges of that picture. If it's a film, pause it and then drain the colour out of it so it becomes a still black and white photo. And then put that still black and white photo into like a big old frame that you see like in an old-fashioned art gallery. And then push that frame black and white picture further away, and then further away and further away. So it's the size of a postcard, it's the size of a stamp, and it's the size of a dot on the horizon. And the more you push that far away, the less the negative impact you'll feel in your stomach. So move the negative far away and you'll feel less negative.
You're picturing it, your hip pause, remove the color.
Yeah,
make it
put it in a frame and then push it away, push it and push it and push it away. So I'll do this.
You do that as each sort of anxious moment comes into your mind?
Yeah, so this is a technique I use when I do my phobia removals with my hypnotherapy clients. So I'll do like a little bit of rhythmic breathing to get them into a calm state, get them to imagine the thing they dislike. And then I do that whole technique, push it further and further away. Then I get them to do some breathing at the end of it.
Right.
And when I repeat that a couple of times, it gets rid of their phobias. But in a job interview, because we all get a little bit anxious because, it's something we don't do every single day. If you're in the chair and you get a little bit nervous, you'll go like, what am I thinking of? Oh, I'm thinking that I'm going to mess up. So get that far, push it in front of you, drain the colour, pause it, and push it further away. You can do that like in the instant and just repeat it 3 or 4 times. And then you'll find that feeling of fear starts reducing inside of you.
Interesting. Oh, how fascinating. Well, Chris, I have shared on the bio that I'm going to put along with this podcast. I've got your Christopher-Delaney.com website, employmentking.com, and then also a link to your book on Amazon. What is your interview identity? You have 2 jobs going on and you've published a book. What do you anticipate? What are you excited to share with us or what are you excited for the upcoming year?
So one of the things I did before this book is I wrote a play for the first time. I wrote and directed a play at a local fringe festival that I put on, and I really enjoyed that whole new experience of doing that, and I love the theatre as well. So I think I might start my second play maybe and see how that goes. Wow. So nothing to do with job interviews, but it's a creative process.
Oh, goodness. That sounds exciting. So if people want to learn more about you, as I said, I've listed your website and a link to your book. Are there any other links or other ways that people can connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn quite a lot. So people send me lots of direct messages and I answer people's questions on there. So you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. And just what an eye-opening insight into how your, the little details that you can control and really improve your confidence and increase your likability in nanoseconds, it seems like.
Yeah, and it's all based off research as well. So sometimes you kind of, especially like if you were blogging as an example, you might kind of just give some advice in your own opinions. But everything I talked about today has come from academic research. So it's kind of been proven to just give you that edge in the job interview.
Oh, I love that. Well, Chris, thank you so much.
Brilliant. I really enjoyed chatting to you as well. It's been really fun.
Thank you.
You've been listening to The Resume Storyteller with Virginia Franco. To learn more about storytelling strategies to catch the eye of today's online skim hiring and decision makers, please visit www.virginiafrancoresumes.com.